Hello, gear nerds of the internet. We are talking about the Nobsound 12AX7 preamp yet again. Why? Let's get into it.
Six in the morning.
So yeah, you may have watched my previous video where I say that this thing is fairly ugly, kind of cheaply made, at least in terms of the components are cheap. All tube phono preamp that sounds pretty good and is relatively inexpensive. Since making that video, I had watched another video of someone else comparing this thing to two other all tube preamps. They came to different conclusions. This is the second time I'm making this video. Originally, I made this video a while ago where I had actually showed how to rectify two of the issues that they had that I thought were potentially partially valid, that I then never posted because I don't necessarily want to be in the business of showing people how to mod their tube gear because it's dangerous. Now, so for demonstration purposes, I have the back off this thing. If you don't know what you're doing, do not take the back off this thing. Why? Because tube amps have these electrolytic capacitors. Now, these aren't particularly big, but other ones have really big ones that store quite a bit of voltage. So if you're in the US or Canada or Japan, you have 120 coming out of your wall. These things can hold over 450 volts. If you ever got zapped from a wall and you're like, oh wow, that sucks, that would suck a lot more, for sure. So if you don't know how to discharge electrolytic capacitors, I do not recommend modifying these or opening these at all. If you do, that's cool. Knock yourself out. So, again, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. That's the safest way to be. I don't need you dying. That would suck. So, they had come to some different conclusions, not about the ugliness. They agreed on the ugliness. Again, I don't think it's that ugly. I mean, it's very DIY looking, but some people do enjoy that look. I'm going to guess not many. So they had said that it has cheap components, like tube. The tubes are Chinese, therefore cheap, therefore bad, which I don't think is necessarily true. But whatever. Let me say this. I think this is reiterating something in the first video. I replaced these with Russian-made ones. To me, that's made the preamp sound better. Maybe a little bit, maybe not necessary, but whatever. These I kept as the stock 12AX7s that were Chinese, and I swapped these out with different ones, and it made no difference, at least to me. So those are fine. And then these ones are the 12AX7s, and it definitely, if you put better 12AX7s in there, it's going to have a better sound. 100% agree. Let's talk about the other cheap components. As I stated in that video, these originally were garbage. These ones I replaced are significantly better. The first ones that came in this thing, the original ones, I couldn't even get some RCA cables to connect to them because they were just the specs were completely off. And some of them, they wouldn't hold out. They would just fall right out. It was such a crapshoot. Some of these preamplifiers that you'll see don't have these surface or not surface mounted, chassis mounted inputs. They'll have like screws here that screw into a plastic set of inputs. I would not buy one of those because you might not be able to replace those as easily. So I wouldn't even bother with that. So in terms of cheap components, you know, that switch isn't particularly great. I mean, it's okay. That's not like an Alps Blue Velvet pot, but you know what? It's, I don't know, whatever. It's $300. And then the on-off switch seems fine. this sheet metal that they basically bent to create this, it's not super thick. Like, so that's not awesome. But I mean, it's $300. In the world of hi-fi, $300 is nothing. People pay that much on one preamp tube. So it's all relative, right? So I don't know, like, I agree that there's some cheap stuff that maybe needs to be replaced. Like, those input jacks definitely need to be replaced. Does anything else need to be replaced? Assuming that these are real WEMA, and they might not be, because a lot of times Chinese manufacturers use fake components. But if those are real, those are used in really high-end amplifiers. So those parts aren't cheap. These electrolytic capacitors, I don't know if those are cheap. They're probably cheap. And then the resistors, I don't know. Resistors are resistors to me. Maybe I'm being stupid, but so long as they're doing the right thing, I don't care. And then, you know what's not cheap is all this point-to-point wiring. It takes a lot of time and man-hours, and that's not cheap. But in China, it's cheap because they have 35 billion people, and they're willing to pay them nothing to do work. So, I mean, I don't know. If that was made in America, that would cost you an extra $1,000. Okay, so cheap components, check. We've discussed it. One of the other things is that they said that the way that these, you could see that these wires in here are in the same, they get fed into this bigger wire harness, and then they said that might increase crosstalk. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Will you hear it? I don't know. Let's see. What other things did they complain about? They said that there wasn't enough input gain. I don't have that issue. This thing goes pretty loud. Usually I'll have it, you know, like there. I don't have an issue with this not having enough gain. But apparently there's different versions of this, so I'm going to assume that maybe their version is a little crappier than mine, or I don't know. Maybe they had a bad tube, although I think they said that they swapped the tubes out. I don't know. But I don't have that problem. They also had said that, now this is the part that's crazy to me, is that, so they you know, they're much smarter than me in terms of electronics, theoretically. I mean, definitely, not theoretically. I might have more experience with tube amps in general than them, but they have a higher level of understanding of electronics. So they claim that this thing, because it was based on a vintage design, that it was designed to have the least possible distortion. Ergo, it's not going to have a tube sound. Which to me is the craziest thing ever. Because distortion, I don't believe, is what the tube sound is. Furthermore, every amplifier that was made that is highly regarded, whether it's a Macintosh from the 50s and 60s, or if we're talking about a Fender twin reverb made in the 60s, they were designing those to have no distortion. And would anyone say that a twin reverb doesn't have a tube sound? It absolutely has a tube sound. So it's not about the design. It's not about purposely adding distortion into the equation of your design. That, to me, that's insane. Like, that's not the tube sound. The tube sound isn't just distortion. So I don't know. Maybe that's debatable, but to me it's not, because if you look at, again, all the old amplifiers, especially all those Fender amplifiers, regardless of any of the size of them, and the fact you could turn them up all the way and get it to distort, they weren't designed to distort. That's why they're so loud. And even when they're not loud, they still sound tubey. So I don't see what that has to do with anything. Let's see. So here was another comment that I thought was really weird. They said that this doesn't need these tube rectifiers because There's MOSFETs in here. I don't see silicone diode rectifiers at all. I don't see anything solid state in here whatsoever. So this is the power supply. There's nothing there. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves, people. So these little guys, those are solid state rectifier diodes. I don't see any of those in here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone, guys, point them out to me. Where is the solid state MOSFETs in here that this person claims that is in there? Yeah, they're not in there. So to me, that's coming out of left field entirely. All right, so going through my list. I think so all of that to me is partially right, partially not right, or flat out wrong. Oh, let's talk about something else they said. They said that this is expensive. $300 is not expensive. They said that the other two preamps that they had were less expensive than this. I don't know. I tried to find them on the internet. I couldn't find one. I found one similar to one that they had in the video, and that one was like almost double the price of this. So I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe when they made their video, or maybe when they bought that other one, it was cheaper, but it's definitely not cheaper now. You can go on Amazon right now and buy this for $300. I couldn't find any other all tube preamp that you could buy for $300 brand new. All right, so this one is where they have a completely valid point. So this is based on a vintage amplifier, and the people who made this kind of ignored the parts where you don't want it to be vintage. And that's in two different components here. So let's go with this. So this, if you look at it, right there, it's 110 volts. Now, this was designed back when you had 110 volts coming out of your wall. Again, in the US or Canada or Japan. Other places will not have 120. What did I say? Did I say 120? I don't know. 120. Or it had 110 coming out of their wall. Now it's about 120. Some people might still have 110. But, so the person making the video said that since this is 120, it's going to send higher voltages to the tubes, which is absolutely true. It is 100% true that because this power transformer is going to get more juice in, it's going to send more juice to these tubes. I 100% agree with that. Where I differ is that they said it's a big problem and you're going to eat through these tubes. I don't know if that's accurate. And I'm basing this on anecdotal evidence of me owning vintage guitar amplifiers for years and not having that issue. So, furthermore, again, lots of people own vintage guitar amplifiers. Lots of people own vintage hi-fi gear. They all have 120 or 110 volt transformers. And you could have a variac and you could turn it down so it's not getting 110 to that. Or it's not getting 120, it's getting 110. They have a big device that'll do that. I'm sure that there are other power supplies where you could tweak the wall voltage. But I would guess that 95% of the people who own those are not doing anything even similar to that. So what I did was I did a mod that I demonstrate in that original video that you'll never see. It's only going to ever live on my computer. That I took two devices that are called thermistors. They're like resistors, but either increase or decrease the resistance based on the heat. And I put them, you can see it here, from the power input to the power switch to bring that voltage down. I'm not going to go too far into that other than that because I don't want to be responsible for people doing that. So that ended up bringing the voltage down on these guys. And my original point was like, hey, these issues that they're claiming are issues can be rectified rather inexpensively. Like, I think those parts were $10. But again, I don't want to show you how to do that because I don't want to be responsible for your potential debt. Okay, let's not do that. And so, again, and I even consulted a guy that I know that works on amplifiers for a living. And I said, how much of it is a big deal that this thing has a 110 volt power transformer, and will it burn out the tubes, and is it worth it to do the thermistor thing? And he's like, it's not a big deal at all. So, it's not just my opinion, it's other people's opinions as well. But again, you can solve it. You can bring the voltage down to these things and make them live longer. You know what I was kind of thinking, though, is maybe that why people like the sound of vintage amplifiers more? Because they're hitting these tubes harder and making it sound better, potentially? Interesting thought. Anyway, so let's get to the part where they're absolutely correct. This thing was originally not grounded, which I somehow missed. It's grounded now, which again, I had a video that you'll never see of how to do this. This is super easy, quite frankly. It's just a matter of taking a wire and grounding it to the chassis. This was not always the case in the bad old days. Sometimes what they would do they would on the negative, they would have what would be called a death cap, which was a capacitor that would then get grounded, which would cause all kinds of issues. Where, if you ever seen like the movie Almost Famous, where the guy with the guitar grabs the microphone and gets zapped. That is because back in the bad old days, when you had a 2-prong outlet, you could invert that, and now your death cap is on the wrong one. And so now you have an issue with your line voltage going here. Or if that, imagine that there is a death cap here, and if that was grounded here and that thing went, now you have voltage going straight here. You have 110 back in the day, 110 volts going right to your chassis. And you touch that and you get zapped. If you plug this in, again, it was 2-prong, and you inverted it, you had it in the wrong, you were basically sending positive voltage to the death cap, you'd get zapped off of this thing, which is why they added a ground to this stuff. So it goes to basically the ground of around your house. It goes to down and then into your basement if you have a basement, or your electric box, and then from your electric box, your ground wire gets stuck into the earth. So rather than the power going inside of you, it gets dissipated into the earth where no one can get hurt except for maybe worms. I don't know. Do you think there's worms that have died from that? It's interesting. Maybe grounded outlets aren't vegan. Let's think about that. So yeah, is that a big deal? I think it's maybe a big deal. Some people will say it's not a big deal. Some people do not care if their vintage gear doesn't have a ground. on any vintage gear that I've owned, I add a grounded cable on it and I ground it. And if it has a depth cap, you get rid of it. That's just me. Some people don't care. Oh, that's right. Some people don't care. My camera doesn't care to let me know that it stopped recording because I got to the 20-minute mark and that's all it will record. So yeah, I care about the grounding. And I guess, so instead of saying that I would recommend this, I guess I would say that I wouldn't recommend it. Do I have a tube amp, phono, or not a phono preamp, a tube preamp that I'd recommend other than that? I guess I don't. So I guess if you know how to ground it, then I recommend it. If you know a guy who will ground it for, or a girl, or whatever, you know, it's 2022, gender non-conforming person that will ground it for you if you don't know how to do it. It's, you know, it takes you longer to heat up your soldering iron than to fix it. I guess then I would recommend it, but if you don't, I would recommend not buying this. And again, I don't have a recommendation for you because there's not a lot in the $300 price range. And if you have a suggestion for a all-tube stereo preamp, put it down below because I'd love to know it. It's because I don't know one. But there we go, guys. I guess, you know, maybe buy it, I guess is my, but maybe not. That is the worst wishy-washy answer ever, but that's what I got for you, guys. Or maybe you should buy this. I will sell this if someone wants to buy it. Comment down below or follow me on Instagram and DM me there if you want to buy this. I'll sell it to you because I don't have a need for it so much anymore. With all the mods, you get it pre-modded, guys. Buy it. My wife is so sick of all the gear laying around the house. She is ready to kill me. Which is more an angry wife is definitely more dangerous than a non-grounded tube amplifier. See you later, guys.